Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. We're here, we are well into a Grand Prix weekend and it feels so good to be back. It does, it feels good to see cars back out on track. We've had the first 2 out of 3 practice sessions and there's a little bit for us to get into from a very weather affected FP1 and a nice sunny, speedy FP2. We also have some stuff that's been happening off track to talk about, so let's dive into that first. And the first bit of news is that Alpine have finally confirmed that Jack Doohan will be driving for the team in 2025. The announcement came today before any on-track action, and I have to say I am pretty happy for the guy. I was a little bit worried a few months ago that maybe he wouldn't get a seat. I would say his CV is not massively impressive compared to some of the rookies that we have gotten in recently, your Oscar Piastris, your George Russells, your Lando Norrises, and I was maybe a bit worried that he wouldn't be given the opportunity. I'm very glad he has. He has a bit of a thrown in at the deep end. He is obviously the reserve and sim driver for them, but he is stepping into a completely different role with completely different expectations. It is important to note that he is basically signed on for 1 year. There is no multi-year deal and beyond. It is 2025, and I think they basically just want to keep their options open and make sure that they are making the right decision by keeping Doohan on into 2026 if they decide to. He's obviously stepping in beside Pierre Gasly, which in itself is quite the challenge. Gasly is a very good driver. He's a race winner, so there's that's a bit of a challenge. And then, I mean, he's stepping into a team that seems to be all over the place. We've got a new team principal. We could be ditching our engine program. We've got Flavio Briatore kicking around. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot going on down at Alpine. So yeah, do you know what? All the best of luck to the guy. I wish him all the luck. And I am very excited to see what's going to be going on in 2025, because we've got Hamilton to Ferrari, Doohan at Alpine, Sainz at Williams. We've got Oliver Bearman moving into Haas. We've potentially got Liam Lawson. Helmut Marko is saying that Liam Lawson is dead set getting a seat next year in one of the Red Bull teams, Red Bull or V-Carb. Christian Horner saying, well, we can also loan him out when he was asked about it. So don't know what's quite going on there. There's always just conflicting stories coming out of Red Bull, isn't there? There's Helmut Marko saying this, Christian Horner saying that. You never really know what's going on until there's actual announcements. So we shall wait and see on that one. We have basically had confirmation from Toto Wolff that Kimi Antonelli will be driving for Mercedes next year alongside George Russell. Now, the announcement is rumoured to be next week, but Toto Wolff did let slip to the media. I think he was saying that the team is basically going to be fully behind both the drivers of Mercedes next year. And he basically wishes that everything will run smoothly between George and Kimi. And that was his words. And I think it was maybe just a little bit of a slip of the tongue. But we will probably have an Antonelli announcement next week, so that'll be fun to get into. The next bit of news comes from Haas, and it is probably some of the strangest news out of Formula One that I've heard in a while. So let's try and break it down. Back in 2022, one of Haas's sponsors was a company called Uralkali, which is a Russian company. I think they were their main title sponsor. That partnership was ended when the war in Ukraine happened. Haas was told by the courts that they were completely within their right to do it, no problems, no issues. But Uralkali went to the courts and Haas was then told it had to pay back the sponsorship amount, whatever that was. I think I seen somewhere that it was 13 million euros. Haas hasn't done that, apparently. And Uralkali has gone back to the courts and now Haas can't leave the Netherlands without paying the money back. And I've seen stuff that they've had bailiffs and the police in the garage looking at all the assets of the team, as it were, from cars to equipment to whatever else, and basically tallied up how much that is worth. And if Haas can't pay, they'll seize the assets of the team, so cars and whatever else. And I don't know how bailiffs work, but I'm assuming that they take like the most expensive stuff because that would obviously pay your debt off quicker. So in a double header where they're literally on Sunday after the race going to have to pack everything down and ship it off to Italy, to Monza, to build it all back up really quickly, if Haas don't make this payment to Uralkali, they can't leave Zandvoort. So what what's going to happen? As I said, I don't think it's a case of not being able to pay the bill or have the money to pay the bill, but Haas has said that the reason they haven't paid the bill was the company was owned by Nikita Mazepin's father. Nikita Mazepin used to be a driver for the Haas team. He was also dropped around the time that Uralkali was also dropped as sponsor. Sanctions were then put on Nikita Mazepin and his father by the European Union and the governments of the UK and all that kind of stuff for the war in Ukraine, as he was obviously a Russian person of high importance. I don't know how sanctions work either, really, to be honest with you. Haas has basically then turned around and said that they are trying to find a way to make the payment to Nikita Mazepin's father, who owns this company, without breaking any of these sanctions and any international laws, which they also don't want to do. It's basically just a complete mess that they've managed to get themselves into. They're going to have to find a way to sort it out in the next, like, 2-3 days, because if they can't get that sorted, the Dutch can basically say, well, you're not leaving. And we'll be watching that one very closely to see what happens. Right, now let's get into the action on track. And FP1 was pretty chaotic, to be honest with you. And that is purely just down to the weather. It was all kinds of Wizard of Oz, hurricanes, tornadoes. The weather was crazy. It was blowing an absolute gale. It was raining. Cars were skidding about all over the gaff. I think at one point, at turn 1, we had, I think the order went something like Hülkenberg, Perez, Gasly, Sainz, all just one after the other, just off the track. But, I mean, everybody went off. Max Verstappen had a spin. Hülkenberg had a lot of spinning. George Russell had a bit of a spin. They all just, you know, were carrying, I think a lot of it was just carrying a little bit too much speed. Max was just because he hit a car going into turn 10, I think it was. But a lot of them was just, they couldn't slow the cars down enough, a bit of a lock-up in the wheels, and there was lots of little off-track adventures. And it does seem that this is going to be a weekend that the weather, specifically the wind, is going to play quite a factor for these drivers. It's funny, because of the way the track is with, you know, the banking and stuff, there is quite a few bits of the track that you can be quite covered from these winds. They are right by the North Sea, so there is quite a, you know, a wind coming off of that. So there is a few areas where they are quite protected, but there is some areas where they're just coming into corners and there's just a rogue, like they can't track really just a rogue change in the wind. And these cars are so finely tuned that it is a big effect for them to contend with. So I think we're going to see some quite spicy moments over the weekend. And if a car gets stopped at any point of the track, it is 100% a safety car, because there's nowhere really for the cars to go at quite a lot of this track. The rain did stop, thankfully, and then it was just kind of the wind and the standing water that the cars and had to navigate through. It was actually quite an interesting session to watch, because we went from hella windy and rainy to hella windy with standing water to just hella windy. And we went through wet tyres, intermediate tyres, soft tyres. FP1 and the weather did throw up some like rogue names in rogue places, like Zhou Guanyu finished the session P10. We also had Robert Schwartzman in place of Valtteri Bottas for FP1 in the Sauber, and I don't expect much from these rookies in these FP1 sessions. You know, as long as they don't bin it, as long as they're not like 5 minutes off, as long as, you know, if they're close towards the back of the pack, if they're anywhere next to their teammate, as it were, even better. Robert Schwartzman nearly fell off my chair when we were running intermediate tyres and he was sitting P3. And I was like, Jesus goddamn Christ. But then obviously it didn't really last for long. The slicks, I don't know if I've seen him do a slick run, but he finished P16, which to be fair is not a bad job considering he finished ahead of Sargent, Ocon, Ricciardo and Gasly. But then this is why I say FP1's not really comparative, I would say, because I don't think Gasly's 10 seconds plus off the pace down in P20. Lando Norris did manage to top the timesheets of the session. That, if you'd asked me after that session, I'd have said, yeah, Lando Norris has got this in the bag. In the bag. But, as I always say, FP1's not a comparative session, to be honest with you. The most comparative of the 3 free practice sessions we have is FP2. So in FP2, we got some lightning quick times. It was like pew, 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 constantly. And we had quite a bit of like mini racing. Everyone was, I think, pretty desperate to get out. I think because FP1 had been quite weather affected and we now had a completely dry track. We had calmed down on the wind. The sun was shining. I think all the drivers were eager just to get out and get data in, get some rubber down, and let's just start getting some quali runs in. We got some race pace runs as well. So when the lights went green at the end of the pit lane, it was like constant just fighting for position between these drivers. At one point there was like 3 drivers, I think Russell was one of them, just trying to overtake one another just to get track positioning so they could just start getting laps in. And I've come out of FP2 thinking that the fight for this Grand Prix is going to be between 2.5 teams. And that is the McLarens, the Mercedes, and Max Verstappen. And to be fair, that is pretty much how FP2 finished. Russell topped the timesheets, followed by Piastri, followed by Hamilton, followed by Norris, followed by Max Verstappen. And it's just, I think it's going to be a fight between those 5. McLaren is looking quick. We know it's a very quick car. That Mercedes is looking quick at the hands of, especially at the hands of George Russell. And I'm liking this form that Mercedes are getting themselves into now. They're feeling a lot more confident with the car. They're a lot more comfortable. Lewis Hamilton says it. He's like, every time I get into that car, I feel more and more comfortable. They're finding themselves finally, and it's so good to see. It's going to be quite an interesting qualifying, and as I said, I think this is going to be a quali race. There's not much overtaking opportunities at Zandvoort. It's quite a narrow, skinny track for a lot of it. It's going to be a very exciting race, I think. A very exciting quali and a very exciting race. I'm just loving where we are at F1 at the moment. We've got 3 teams all fighting for wins. And as much as I would love to chuck a 4th in and say Charles Leclerc and Ferrari and Carlos, and they're going to be in and about there, wasn't really their session. Yeah, Charles Leclerc finished P13, Carlos Sainz did finish P14, but as I said, FP1, very weather affected, rain, bloody hurricanes, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not taking it as truly representative. I refuse to believe that FP1 is truly representative with Zhou Guanyu finishing ahead of Charles Leclerc. And then in FP2, Leclerc was sitting P9, which is a bit better. Sainz, we don't have a proper reading for him. He's down as P19, but he did have to retire the car with a gearbox issue, which is not great. I don't think my prediction of the P3 Charles Leclerc is going to happen, but I'm keeping fingers crossed. Max's teammate, Sergio Perez, he finished FP2 12th. He was 8/10, I think, nearly 9/10 off the pace. And I just pray, I know I said in my predictions that this is like, maybe the weekend Perez bounces back. At this point, I really don't care. I just don't want to be sitting here every race weekend talking about whether or not Perez is going to keep his seat. My God, it's just boring. Boring. But Christian Horner doubled down on Perez after the session. He was asked by Natalie Pinkham again about Perez's performance, and he was like, you guys keep asking me this. He was like, and my answer is still the same. And it's like, why? The only other thing of note was Nico Hülkenberg took a bit of a spin in FP2 and crashed into the barrier. He got out of the car, he was fine, thankfully, and he was out of the session, unfortunately. So him and Carlos not in good places going into FP3. As I said, I'm very excited. Let's go. McLaren, Mercedes. I will be so happy for any one of those 4 drivers to win. So happy. Even though my predictions were for Max, just be so happy. We're in for a spicy weekend, and hopefully Haas will be able to race in Monza next week. But as I said, I'll keep you updated on that. But that is everything from us. I will see you tomorrow after qualifying. Enjoy the rest of your day. I love you. Bye.